We'll just make sure it gets moved to the other group as well. It should be posting automatically, but
Okay.
hey everyone, Dave Putz here from JKP Holdings, alongside my Nathan Turner. How you doing, man? How's the week treating you?
Really good. Really good. It's been a good week.
So, so this week's been a kind of a weird week. We'll open with an odd situation. We weren't sure if we'd talk about it, but I think it'd be interesting to talk about a little bit. Um, we go to this conference yesterday,
Yeah.
and it was something we wanted to learn about. And I think that it was very interesting to learn about it because it's a different avenue of note investing that we're not used to, and it's something we want to explore and learn about. A lot of it was over our head, and a lot of it was stuff that is different from our institutional world. Um, I think that with that, we found common understanding that it's something that we should learn about, but it's such a big sector.
Yeah.
It's probably like jumping into our world at one time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that was a lot of high level talk that I understood part of it, but really not a whole lot. So
Yeah,
that was interesting.
yeah,
Did you do
It-
the network? Or yeah, you did. We talked about
yeah.
the networking thing.
So it was weird. For those who weren't there, whatever, you had a chance to kind of randomly meet people.
Yeah.
Um, when you randomly meet people, they pick based on your interests.
Yeah.
Well, I picked investor because I was curious what other investors out there, hoping I'd run into somebody that I can learn from a little bit and just connect with. Well, oddly enough, I run into Nathan in the middle of the thing going, oh crap, like, hey, what's up? So it was quite interesting. But anyone who's was part of that or curious about that, please feel free to, jump in and ask some questions and all that stuff. So Nathan, we want to talk today about ways you've acquired deals that are just not unique. You got to table assets or a list of assets that a seller sold that just were just not normal. It was something different.
Yeah.
That
Weird
the
stuff.
deal just happened and the way that deal came about happened.
Yeah.
So give a situation that a deal came or what was a situation where a deal came across your table and a little more detail about it and like what went on to make it weird.
So this has actually turned into a fairly consistent deal flow for me, where I'm trying to remember how we met in the first place. It might have been at a conference, and ran across this girl and from middle of Texas somewhere, and she's telling me how they sell notes. And so we got kind of talking about it, and of course I'm interested because I would like to buy more.
Yeah.
So their whole deal is they buy seller finance notes just in Texas.
Okay.
So they're mom and pop seller finance stuff, like nothing institutional, nothing professional at all. And then they'll come across ones that are um, deals that are becoming non-performing or whatever, and then they'll pitch them over to me, and I'll pick up some of those. But it's a little odd because they're seller finance deals. Sometimes the paperwork is a little screwy.
What does screwy mean? What define what you mean by that?
Well, like for example, I've actually been pretty impressed with the pay histories that I've gotten.
Okay.
But at best, they're somebody's spreadsheet where they put it on a random spreadsheet. So like no
Oh,
software, anything tracking, anything like that, but they're keeping track of how many times people have paid. So that's good.
okay.
But actually, it's not good enough that I can get it with a regular servicer. A regular servicer doesn't want to handle those, so I end up having to.
That's a huge difficulty.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing because I think we're going to talk about this weekend at one of our. We're going to do a webinar this whole weekend on Sunday night, talking about that particular topic. That seller
Yeah.
finance is a world that you can get into, but the difficulty of seller finance is traumatic because they're not the clean cut deals that we're used to.
No, no, and they're a little bit funky. Uh, so far, the paperwork that I've gotten has actually been decent.
Okay.
Nothing written on the back of a napkin or
Yep.
anything. It's actual real documents made up by real attorneys, deeds of trust because it's Texas. But the pay history has been the thing that's been just a little bit screwy and good enough that I feel comfortable taking it on, but certainly not standard.
Yeah.
So that's been fun.
Usually collateral is the okay part, but
Yeah,
I think that the pay history and the data on it is difficult.
it is. And then the other thing that's a little bit kind of weird is this was, a seller finance thing. So it was, Joe Blow and his wife sold a property that they owned to somebody else, and now they wanted to cash out for whatever reason.
Okay.
Um, but because of that, because it's just mom and pop, property owner who's selling a property, they've got a different kind of a relationship with the borrowers.
Yep.
Not an institutional relationship, but very much a personal relationship, and which doesn't bother me at all. But again, it can be a little bit kind of weird walking into that kind of a situation where I'm trying to pick up on this personal relationship that they had, and now I'm the new guy coming in, and
Who the hell you? Yeah.
yeah.
And have you bought a deal from them that was a killer, like, that just was just ridiculous? And do you think that did they give it away for a reason, or what's your thought process there?
Yeah, it really, I've had a couple that have gone really well. I had one where we ended up taking back property and sold it, and it was worth more than what it
Okay.
was reported as. So great, that worked out well. And then I had actually a couple more just that I bought last year,
Okay.
where the performance, they weren't actually that far behind. They were only like 4 or 5 months behind, which in our world, like as we know, 4 or 5 months, that's nothing.
Yeah, like, all right, sounds good to me.
That's
It's
nothing.
not 3 years.
Yeah. So the one, I kind of called them on it and said, so here's the situation. You're 4 months behind or whatever it was. And so, okay, they just paid up the arrears. Awesome. So
Wow.
I got a nice bump up front, and then they're back to paying regular. No problem.
And were their servicer not doing their job, or what? Did they not reach out to the borrower, you think?
Well, that's kind of the trick, is it's not with a servicer. It's with mom
Gotcha.
and pop investor. So, maybe they let it slide, whatever.
Yep.
But it just, over time, it kind of
Yeah.
adds up. And it wasn't even necessarily consecutive missed payments. It was, they missed one this year and then 2 more that year and another couple that other year. And they made up a couple of those, but in the overall, they're still 4 or 5 months behind.
And seller finance notes, as much as they're really the Wild West. Like,
Oh yeah.
they do things that are just completely different from all of our understanding.
Yeah.
And sometimes the collateral papers, just the way that they set up the schedules off,
Yeah.
every third week, it's just weird, right? So,
Yeah.
someone I want to learn about, which we're going to run the webinar this weekend about, not only buying it, but like, how do you find the new deals, right? So the webinar we're running Sunday night is all about finding the deals. Like, how can you skip the broker and market these companies?
Right.
We know a friend of ours who's going to be on the webinar, Gabe, has done a ton of these things where he's marketing, buying lists, marketing, selling it, and then getting a hold of the seller. And he's shared with us, he's got to contact them 3 or 4 times and explain them, why am I buying the discount?
Yeah.
And
he's sending out postcards, right?
Yeah. I think he had like 18,000. He'll be talking this
Some
weekend.
crazy thing. Yeah.
But the home runs he's hitting is ridiculous.
We get the stories, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah, like he bought
Happy for him,
thirds. Yeah, buys
Happy
thirds and gets
for him.
paid off.
right. I'm happy for him, but at the same time, I'm just a little
Yeah.
jealous. Like,
Yeah. So Gabe, if you're listening, man, we're coming for you. No. So I think you're right. Those kind of papers definitely weird, right? It's
Yeah.
nothing typical, nothing what we've gone into. For us, the weird paper I run into is the investor who's trying to get out.
okay.
We've had a lot of those kind of investors who they come to us with like, hey, listen, I don't want to shop this. I'm giving it to you. You give me the price and you'll walk away with the deal from.
Right.
Which feels kind of awkward because I can like take advantage of them, but
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
But it came down to, it was a deal. One deal was in Pennsylvania where it's like, I don't want it. The UPB is like $9,000. Like, I don't want that deal. And there was like some seconds on there I really wasn't interested in.
Yeah.
And, you know, that person just wanted to get out. They wanted to get out of the space. They were getting into a different investment strategy and they just didn't like it. They didn't like the legal part of it and just the headaches and dealing with bankruptcy stuff and dealing with a servicer. They were trying to self-service and it just didn't work out well.
Yeah.
So, you know, we came across this deal. I kind of questioned why and
Mm-hmm.
then flatline. I said, listen, if that's the case, we're going to go ahead and buy it. So I gave them a couple pricing and they said, let's do it. Those deals have tremendously been rewarding. We bought that, I think we bought the 9,000 UPB for $2,000 and the
Yeah.
payments are like $450 a month. I mean, it's just whatever it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Holy crap, you know, couple of forbearance agreements and whatnot. But I think for us, it was, you know, we buy more loans from investors who are trying to get out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I understand that that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah.
So are you going to be getting into more seller finance stuff?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
If it comes up and if it's clean enough, it
Yep.
doesn't have to be perfect, but if it looks good enough and the numbers are good, sure.
Yeah.
I did the same kind of thing last year. I bought a couple of notes for $500 each,
Yeah.
where they were low balance. They were only like $3,000,
Yeah.
but their maturity in like a year and a half. So I'm like, sure. So, I mean, the return is ridiculous, but it's
Yeah.
$300, $400 a month.
That's a problem with a lot of these small deals because they're not a $200,000 institutional loan. They're
Yeah.
typically smaller loans.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's a barrage of properties and they combine into one new.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have you ever been in a situation where you bought a loan from somebody like at a conference? Like, hey, I got this loan on myself. Have you done that? Have that been successful for you?
I think I have. I'm trying to remember which one it is. I got my other lists, past deals going back here. I have. I'm trying to remember which deals they were. I don't remember them being, ultra stellar, but not bad either.
Yeah.
So, they worked out as well as any other deal.
I bought a deal of somebody similar that they had a partner and they had to get out because it's been a
Okay.
while. The partner to get paid off and they were JV'd into the deal. Um, and again, it was a situation where I heard them actually talking to another investor. And then another investor was like, well, let me look at numbers. And I luckily had my phone on me, threw it in my calculator. I'm like, here's what I'm going to probably pay you.
Yeah.
And within 3-4 minutes, you're like, let's do it. Like, let's make it
Perfect.
happen.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out to be the greatest deal, but it was a scenario. And a lot of people ask, how do I get deals? How do you find deals? You don't have to buy it from the traditional institutional lender that everyone knows about.
Yeah.
Just talking and networking.
Talk to everybody.
Yeah. You never know who has a single deal or 10 deals or 100 deals they just need to get out of or rid of. Even hedge funds with, old assets that you've seen before. Go approach them and throw a number to them. Obviously, they didn't sell for a reason.
And you'll get this line where you go talk to someone and they're like, oh, we don't have anything right now, but we'll send you something. Sure they will. So call them back, send them an email, whatever, get in contact with them 6 months from now, whatever it is, and say, hey, do you have anything available? Because it's not top of mind. I do the same thing. People are like, oh, send me a deal.
Yeah.
If I think about it, sure. But just remind me, I'll see what I've got available.
We've had so many investors say, hey, when you get a deal in Maryland, let me know. Listen, we have thousands of people we've talked to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to remember that one person. So I'm not bothered if you email me every other month or so and, hey, you got anything new? Sure.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
Yes, no. So staying on top of your investor friends is a big thing in their space.
Yeah.
And I know that, without getting too much into it, you're going to be ramping up and buying more inventory soon with the fund you're coming out with. So if investors are looking for that passively, it's another avenue to go where you may not be able to buy an asset, but if you can connect with somebody that can buy assets, for you, you can be a passive investor. Don't close that door because it allows you to collect a great return with somebody without having to be on the hook to run it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So just throwing it out there for those who are interested in the passive way of investing.
Yeah.
So has a deal ever gone sideways where it went weird or you didn't know what to do in that scenario?
Here's the thing. When you buy a note, it's not like buying a property. When you buy a property, it's there, it's vacant, it's got bricks and mortar, sticks, whatever it is.
Yeah,
That's easy. But what we're doing is we're buying a note where there's a person involved, and people are weird and they will do the most bizarre things where that's why wouldn't you do that? Like, this is the most logical thing you could do, but they don't,
yeah,
for whatever reason, because they're attached to it, because it's a family home, because I don't know what, but they get attached to it. And it would make way more sense for them just to move out of this house, but they're determined to keep it. Okay, that's great, but you understand what that means, and we just kind of have that frank conversation. Like,
yeah,
okay, if you can afford it, great, but if you can't, I'm here to help some other way. Or if we can make some kind of modification on the loan, sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But
yeah. We had a deal where we couldn't, and
yeah,
you felt guilty. Like, and bars aren't listening to this, but we've been in a situation where you're like, my husband's disabled, lost his job, I can't afford it. I have a tenant who destroyed the house.
yeah,
Help me,
yeah,
and I can't.
yeah,
I just pleaded they don't file BK just to prolong it because, it's like, oh. And another lien was on it, and it was a nightmare.
yeah,
We've also had borrowers who kind of were renting the house out and hadn't collected a rent payment in like 4 or 5 months. And we did a door knock, and the tenant's like, yeah, I can't send my payment to
yeah,
my landlord.
yeah.
It's like, oh my God. So we've sent the door knocker out, and the landlord's on the couch, looked like she's slumped over, like she's whatever. She was sleeping because she worked overnight. And the door knocker called the police on the lady for a well
No
check.
way.
And it was just like, what are you doing? Please. She came in the door pissed off, but hey, she called
uh,
us the next day and like, what's going on? And
yeah,
we ended up getting I think that was a deed in lieu situation. And she just didn't want the property anymore, didn't want to be a landlord anymore. We
hmm,
kept the tenant. The tenant was paying like $800 a month. I paid crap, like 10 grand for the note. It was sweet.
wow, yeah, that's
After a
great.
year, we sold it for like 68 grand, whatever it was. I
Yeah,
mean, it was a slam dunk situation, but that was early on, right?
yeah.
I know Wade had a weird story that what a piece of the plane landed inside the house. I think he shared that story. There's so many, like you said, besides the brick and mortar, we have people.
Yeah,
And people are never ever able to be normal. We're not normal people.
no, and they're caught up in the situation and whatever else, and it just gets tricky.
Yeah.
Not always, obviously, but there are certainly those situations where you just go, really? That's what you want to do? Okay.
Yeah. And I think, for us, it's that we go into it with the thought process that we're going to solve a problem
Yeah.
and we're going to get this exit strategy. And I've learned to throw that out the window because anything's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll go in with a certain mindset of like, okay, this is what I think is going to happen, or this, the most likely scenario, or this would be my ideal scenario. And sometimes it works,
Yep.
often it does, but then other times you get the borrower coming back and they say, well, no, I want to do this instead. And really? Hmm, okay. If
Yeah.
you say so.
I've argued with sellers about performing loans and why buying them all based on the fact that they're going to perform forever.
Right.
I don't understand why it's hard to understand because a loan performed, but that was once not performing, how it's impossible for that loan to stop performing again.
Right.
Um, and they've tried to convince me of it, and I kind of shake my head and say, "Listen, like guys, this happened before.
Yeah.
So why should I assume it's continuing to perform?" I don't know if you price your loans out that way, but I don't price out performers strictly based on yield.
Yeah. No, I'm more when it's a performing loan, I'm on the seller end.
Okay.
And I try to be as upfront as I possibly can and say, so this is the history. I bought it as a non-performer. They
Yep.
got reperforming. They've been performing for however many months it's been. Here's the pay history that, they paid late in the month, but like say the payment date is the first, and I'm, wide open. Here it is. They paid on the
Yeah.
29th, but they paid in that month. So technically they're on time, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. So take
Yeah.
it for what it's worth. I guarantee nothing. I wish I could say that I believe these guys are going to pay forever, but I have no idea.
And I've heard investors say, listen, if they get behind, you as a lender should be straight on top of them and like force them to catch up. And I
Yeah,
used to want to believe that process, that if you're a bad lender, that if you let borrowers kind of flake out, but you have to be flexible.
you do.
These aren't perfect loans
Yeah,
for reasons.
yeah,
Um, and the fact that we can be flexible is one of our huge advantages as investors,
definitely.
individual investors.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you've had it where
Yeah.
all of a sudden they go dark, and then you catch up with them a month later. Oh yeah, I was in the hospital
Yeah.
because of
Oh,
this,
yeah.
that, and the other, and then catch right back up
Yeah.
a lot of the time. But that's why. So okay, that's fine.
Yeah. And we've had those who are like real estate investors or real estate brokers who are they're dependent on cash flow from the job, and they
Yeah,
don't get paid every other week like most people.
right.
They get paid every 3 months, and they catch up.
Yeah,
Or the best one is like a tax refund.
yeah,
Here comes April, boom! Here
yeah,
comes $4,000. Like, okay.
yeah, yeah. I've got one that's paying me $5,000 this week because got their taxes back. So okay, great.
Oh, oh. So these are all deals weird, not because always the paper's weird,
Hmm.
but the borrower is weird. Um, have have you ever got a deal because it was weird because of a something you caught, a wrong valuation, a wrong property?
Yeah, those are the best. Where I had a chunk. I think it was last year that I bought them, 2020. I'd have to go back and look, but there's a chunk of them where the tape, just for sake of conversation. So I received the tape in whatever it was, May, but the tape was dated something like February. So the last date paid was like January or February,
Oh,
and they were being marketed as non-performing. And I look at the pay history was on there. I'm like, there's no way these are all, non-performing. The tape date is back in February. So I bought it.
that's
Sure enough, they're all performing. It's like, yes.
oh, because they have probably that formula there saying if it's more than 30 days, market not performing.
Yeah. And it
Wow.
was just old data that they were working with. There was nothing wrong with the loan. They just gave me old data. So I'm going by
Holy
the data
crap.
they give me, and that works.
Wow.
So I
That's one
had
I haven't pulled off yet. That's great.
yeah, I had like 5 or 6 in that little pool that I bought that worked out really well. So I'm like, yes.
Oh, and there's times where values are way off, right?
Yeah.
That's the most common one. So if you're listening and, don't always trust the seller's compare it. Typically they're higher, but you can
Yeah.
get those slam dunks where they're lower. We won't name names, but we know investors who've bought deals and they sold where the value is much higher. We had
Oh
one
yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
It was New Jersey, who just marketed for 50 grand value and then probably worth 180. We talked about it last week. But I think that the weird tape situations is good too because we've had, and I was terrible at school with this, word definitions of like the asset, like not in tape format,
Uh,
but last sale date, and it's like this doesn't fit in a pretty thing.
right.
But the dates didn't match up, so we kind of analyzed and looked at it and go, whoa, what? And they mistyped it in or whatever it was.
Really? Okay.
Um, and we've had sellers say, listen, take the last paid date as your pay to date. And I'm like, that's not right. And because we asked that question, we actually got new information, which showed different information.
Okay.
And it would show the fact that we were not overpaying because the date was so new. And we lost the deal, but because most people are using the wrong pay to date, probably didn't check it out. It was
Yeah.
interesting. So let's finish up with what you've been doing lately. What have you been working on? Any deals are going on right now that you're struggling with or whatever you're going on?
I've got I've got some of these funky deals. I've got one in Maine. Man,
Okay.
oh man, I'll never buy in Maine again. Holy crow. We're able to pull it out of our butts here to get it done, but Maine, if you didn't know, I didn't. Maine has a rule where if you're going to take this to a foreclosure, there has to be a representative in person from every chain, everybody who owned that
Yeah.
note over the history of the time. So this was traded something like 5 or 6 times. So they were going to have a representative from every one of those companies uh, present at the foreclosure, which, a couple of them don't even exist anymore. Anyway, I found a lawyer that knew the workaround, and so we got that done. But that took a
Thank
long time
God.
just to get that figured out.
Wow. I'm trying to remember, somebody had mentioned that to me before. It may have been Matt Kelly about that, and I didn't realize at the time. And I'm like, holy God, like that could be a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah,
And there are some attorneys out there that really kind of. I mentioned the one. I don't recall who it was, but yeah, holy God.
yeah. So that took months. I calling around to different attorneys, just trying to take the case, and
Yeah.
they all quoted me the same thing. And then finally, I said, "Well, do you know anybody who can take this?" And he's like, "Oh, I tried my buddy Brett, whatever." And so I call him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, totally.
Success.
Here's how you do it. We get an assignment to go straight to you, so we skip all that." And I'm like, "Oh, that's brilliant. That's awesome."
That's awesome. I mean, I think that, those are the kind of things that people don't realize what's going on.
Yeah,
And it's frustrating because you sit there and say, listen, this is something odd,
yeah,
but it's not talked about at all.
yeah,
But we avoided the same reason, that it's just too much of a headache. Now, if you can take advantage of that situation and have the angle,
yeah.
great.
So maybe I will, because now I know the rule in Maine, so I can check it
Yeah.
out beforehand. I don't know.
Yeah.
Other than that, still just buying, selling, doing our thing, getting ready
Okay.
for my fund here, putting all the pieces together for that. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Now, are you been, how is the, I know we talked before about the whole situation, but how are you doing with buying lately? Things have been kind of a weird scenario where we're getting a lot of assets, but sales aren't what they used to be. So it's hard to adjust, quote unquote, to what we're used to.
It hasn't been bad. I just got a couple of tapes earlier this month, and then I got one more here just the other day. There's only like 4 loans on there that just the seller knows that what I'm looking for, and so he sent those to me.
Okay.
Which actually, now that I look at them, I haven't looked at them that close, but I just peeked at it. They're not bad. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Just quick looking at the numbers, that looks pretty decent. So yeah, I mean, there's less. If I look back to a year ago, I keep a separate spreadsheet every month with
Okay.
all the tapes that I receive in that month, in that calendar month. So if I look back from a year ago or 18 months ago, I think for sure I'm getting less tapes than I did back then.
Okay.
But I've got enough, solid sellers that I just talked to him last week and said, "So how is inventory? Like, am I okay to keep going here?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, no problem, no problem." So
Yeah. And I think what most people, and I think we talked about this last week, is Fannie and Freddie just started selling off a few years ago. Like the
yeah,
inventory they had in 07, 08 isn't even hitting us yet.
no,
So combine that with COVID,
yeah,
um, but there are more bigger players. But the inventory, Fannie and Freddie, like I said, just started selling, I think 2015 or whatever it was.
yeah.
So they didn't sell off their assets.
And they sell to the big guys first, and then the big guys will
Yep, trickle down.
trickle down. They'll kick around the things that they want. Maybe they are deciding what they want and what they're going to sell off, and that takes a little while to get around
Yeah,
to our level. So
yeah. We're dealing with BK issues, prolonged, trying to decide if I'm gonna just file motion relief
mhm.
because the cans kick down the curb, just kind of weird
Yeah,
dealing with that. We're dealing with um, we're coming out with we have a beginner video series already out, but we're moving into the fact of making a collaborative community 1, 2, and we post more about that.
good.
But we're finding out is that the inventory has shifted. Um, and relationships are now more important than ever. And we're seeing a lot of deals. Pricing is not as great as ever was. So you have to be a little more creative with things,
Mhm.
which we've adjusted to. But I think that for us, our angle now is to look at seller finance as another way to acquire assets, just at lower pricing.
Yeah.
just to get in a better situation in our yield numbers, so we're not dropping our bid because of the numbers. So
Right.
have, we've been dropping our return requirements a little bit just to adapt to the new sector, because if not, we're going to start losing. We're not going to buy as much as we used to
Right.
at all, but we want to reduce from buying what we're buying now, which is not a lot, to buying a little bit more,
Hmm.
still being careful. Are
Yeah.
you making the same adjustments?
Yeah. Same kind of thing.
Okay.
If you're trying to get the same returns you were in 2012, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So just
Yeah.
realize that it's a little different. I still think we're going to see a bunch of more inventory coming on the
Yeah.
market. So if you're set up for it and you're ready, then great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep going, doing what we're doing.
And I'll end with this. I know most people ask us, what do you buy it performing loans at? What yield you're buying at? And I often can't give that answer.
Yeah.
There's so many moving parts. To simplify that answer is hard. What do you
Yeah.
typically give as an answer if you have one? I mean, we can range from 8 to 13 on a first.
Yeah.
It's hard.
There's quite a range there. And it depends on, location is part of it.
Yep.
Pay history is part of it. Collateral documentation is part of it. I
Number of
mean, there's
payments
all kinds.
left.
Yeah, number of payments left. All those things factor in. What's the interest rate already on there?
Yep.
All those things factor in. But if I was to give a number, when I'm selling my performing stuff, usually it's between 10 to maybe 14, 15 at best.
Sure.
If it's a really hairy note, maybe they'll get a better rate of return on that. But
And tip of the ones I've modified, I'm going to give a little bit higher just for the fact that that can fall apart at any time.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, for us, I think they were in the same boat as you, that 10 to 14. And those who are not sure why we say pay history matters and how many payments are left is because if there's 6 months of payments or a year of payments, buying it, I need a return for that
Yeah.
period of time that makes sense. I'm not going to
Yeah.
buy a year of payments and get an 8% return. It makes no sense at all.
Right.
That money's tied up in 8%. I'm going to need a higher return.
Yeah.
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 So I think right now we're buying performers more than we're buying non-performers, for two reasons. We're getting more opportunity to buy them, and the pricing, right? Buying non-performers right now is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Timelines are just skewy right now, and licenses are changing.
The timelines has been an issue this at the beginning. I mean, it takes a little while to catch up. So there are several counties that still haven't opened up their court systems. But I've got, a good half dozen, maybe a few more that are just waiting on COVID or waiting
Yeah.
for the county to open up and reset a new date. So it's a pain, and it's certainly slowing down that and reduces the return on investment for the investor, which is all not great. Overall,
Yeah.
it'll be fine,
Yeah.
but it's just eating into that rate of return. But can't be helped, unfortunately.
No, and the question of when this will end. Um, I'm even if people say, "Well, here's the new memorandum coming out, and we're gonna have, it's gonna be till July." Right now, it can kick down the curve again. Like I
Yeah,
don't even. I'm projecting out that we're not gonna end this. Like that's what it feels like.
that's a possibility. New strains, whatever. I don't know. Fingers crossed. I'd
Yeah.
be happy to be done by summertime, but
Yep.
I think that's optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're still locked down in Jersey here, so it's a little
Yeah,
different. But um, I know other parts of the country are opening up. So,
yeah.
but
So
well,
hopefully
Nathan,
it'd be great to get in person meeting conferences and stuff like that. So we'll
that's what I
see.
was last gonna say. Nathan, are you planning to attend any conferences next year or this year, for that matter?
Well, I'd love to. My biggest hiccup is the border. I'm up in Canada, and they keep closing. Like the border closure keeps getting bumped 30
Okay.
days every month. So now we're
Wow.
into February, and we'll see in February. I anticipate they'll keep it closed for another month at least.
Oh,
So that's my biggest hang up. Otherwise, I'm sure I could travel safely. I'm not
Yeah,
really too worried about it, but
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see.
Well, we're hoping so too. Like I said, we attended the non-QM yesterday.
Yeah,
Um, it wasn't the same. Handing out business cards, just talking and getting together is a big part of that. But I think that I know DME mentioned they're going to run in something. I'm sure the other ones are going to be doing it. And then I don't know if you're part of the Cash Flow Expo that's coming out. That one's going to be a virtual one as well in February
that's right.
at
That's
the
right.
conference. I
Yeah,
think it's coming up in 2 weeks,
yeah,
ran by Tracy and Fred.
yeah.
So we're going to have to get used to the whole online way to doing it. Um, but those kind of events are hard to do. So.
It is. I think really and truly, I think this is a temporary thing.
Yeah.
It's gone on longer than anybody wants it to, but
Yeah,
it'll end. It'll be fine. We'll get back to
I
some
like
kind
it.
of normal.
All right, Nathan. Well, man, our pleasure, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you. We'll
Yeah,
catch
you
up again
too.
next week. Let's kick it off. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Nathan or myself. If anyone's interested in the fund he's coming out with, just feel free to reach out to him as well.
Yeah.
All right,
Good
guys. Thanks a
talking,
lot.
guys. Thank you.
Take care.